Dive into the NFL news and notes, all the latest on the Eagles. Today, the head coach speaks, and we'll get the latest from John McMullen, who was there, 97.3 ESPN.com. What's going on, Johnny?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Barry not being there, he's it's more I don't want to say akin to Darby being out because he's a better player than Darby and means more to them than Darby means to the Eagles. That's how big a loss Barry is. You would hope on the surface the Eagles are trying to figure out ways to identify that spot on the field right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, Eric Berry's an all-pro player, so you can't compare him to Ronald Darby, although if you look at the positions, it's easier to hide a safety than it is to hide a corner. So in some ways, you could say the Eagles suffered bigger loss by losing their top corner. But we'll see how it shakes out. I asked Frank Reich about Eric Berry yesterday, and he kind of Lou Holtz, Daniel Sorensen up. That's what I call it. When you would have thought that if Eric Berry's the best safety in the game, Sorensen's the second best. The way Frank was talking about it. Obviously, that's not the case, and it's a huge loss for Kansas City. But hey man, everybody deals with it in this league. You got to find a way through it. I think in a lot of ways, Kansas City's defense is predicated on their edge rushers anyway. So I think stopping Justin Houston and Dee Ford remains the biggest issue for the Eagles on Sunday.
Talking with John McMullen. I'm reading through the transcripts here, and one of the things that he was asked today was about captains and why they appointed captains for the team. He said, well, didn't you read the story the other day?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of ways, I wish Pete was there today, because if you go back to Doug started using upper and lower body injury at one point, and now he's talking about captains. You got to ask the questions. It's like we're talking about hockey. But, I've never been one. Who cares who the captains are? Obviously, the leaders of the team have to be your quarterback on offense. And obviously Carson Wentz is, and we know Brandon Graham and Malcolm Jenkins on defense and Chris Maragos on special teams. We all know and Jason Peters would be the other captain. They're all
his answer was great though. Did you read the article on the internet the other day? I explained it in that article.
At Eagles.com.
Yeah.
At Eagles.com. at StateRunMedia.com is what we call it here.
And then the follow-up question was, who wrote the story? And he said, Dave Spadaro, right there. Yeah. Dave Spadaro came out, I think, on Saturday. Like, hey, you guys are missing a whole other level of Eagles coverage here.
Well, I think the Eagles got, there are some things going on here, which is inside baseball. But I'll just say I think the Eagles were a little upset about how the Jim Schwartz, Doug Pederson stuff has been reported.
Well, that's by the way, the back and forth was with the same person who wrote the article.
Exactly. And there's been some issues behind the scenes here as far as pushing us away from the building and escorting us around. So, hey, it is what it is. I've written extensively on it. I think it is overblown. Bill Polian kind of explained it.
I was going to say, what do you make of the Polian stuff? Because he said basically that this offseason that was that's what he had heard. That what was it that Pederson was on the hot seat or thin ice?
Yeah, but he then offered the context of that, which is it was agent driven, and it probably came from a defensive player who wasn't happy about his contract and likes Jim Schwartz, and maybe he's trying to create his own world where Jim Schwartz is in charge. But I don't think Jim Schwartz is actively trying to undercut Doug Pederson. And I don't think that because I think he's a smart guy. It's not going to work. That's not how you go about doing things in this league. And not only would you sort of hamstring your chances here in the building in Philadelphia, you'd hamstring your chances elsewhere because nobody wants that kind of employee. So you have to write about it. You have to report about it. It's real. The story is real. But I think it's being driven by other entities. It's not being driven by Jim Schwartz.
Right. So obviously the Eagles would like this story to go away, but they are aware that this is it seemingly, I don't want to say affected them, but they're aware of it.
Yeah, they're very aware of it, and they don't like it. And I said, imagine if the Eagles lost the season opener, how bad it would be. This team won. They should be happy. They should be more concerned about Kansas City, and I think the football team is. But as far as the front office, it's a difficult media environment here. It really is. It's a difficult media market. I always say people probably don't understand that the Eagles have more media covering them on a daily basis than any NFL team, including the ones in larger cities, the Giants, the Jets, Chicago, the Los Angeles teams. More people cover this team on a daily basis than any other NFL team. So it can be difficult for the organization at times. So I do, give them that. But at times, trying to be adversarial, I think hurts you more than helps you.
So polling is essentially saying that this is agent-driven, that somebody you're surmising that someone on the defensive side of the ball basically said, look, Schwartz wants to be the guy, so he's trying to stir the pot.
Yeah, I mean, Bill kind of went further. He said it was probably a guy with a contract issue who didn't get what he wanted and became angry at the organization. There's a lot of speculation in that story.
Yeah, he said. Said what it tells me is there's likely an agent who represented a Philadelphia defensive player who didn't get paid or was cut or was traded or whatever, and the agent is doing whatever he can to try to create problems for the Eagles in a market where you don't have to do much to create problems.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of leaps there. I don't know if that is the entire truth, but Bill knows better than anyone. Everything in this league is agent-driven. When you see reports, I mean, that's where we get our information from, to be blunt. It comes from agents for the most part. So that part of it is likely very true. The other aspects, you're leaping, you're trying to speculate, just like people are trying to speculate the other way. So the truth is probably some of that is probably the truth. Some of it probably isn't the truth. But ultimately, I don't think there's that much of a disconnect between Doug Pederson and Jim Schwartz. And I've said it a number of times on the show, and I'll continue to say it. I think Jim has gone out of his way to defer to Doug Pederson. And any time you ask Jim Schwartz a question that does not involve his job description, he will not answer it. He simply will not answer it because he doesn't want to create the perception that he's overreaching his job.
Obviously, Doug coached with Andy. He's very close with Andy. Why does he surmise that Andy is so good with the extra time to prepare the situation that he's in this week with playing on Thursday?
Because Andy works hard, and it's preparation, and it's film study, and it's tendencies, and it's getting ready, and it's watching film, and that's the strength of him as a coach. And he's always prepared. He's very rarely caught off guard. When you look at Andy Reid, and he's now a top 10 winningest coach in NFL history, his issues tend to be with time management and when the game is on the fly. As far as preparation, as far as game planning, and things of that nature, and even inside the building, how he runs his program, I literally cannot find one person that would criticize anything Andy Reid does from that standpoint. And he's got a tremendous level of respect around this league that is, interestingly, is probably far less in Philadelphia than the 31 other cities who think he's phenomenal. And I think as we get further along, I think it'll be one of those things where Eagles fans, and I'm not saying they all feel that way, but because they didn't win a Super Bowl, at some point it'll pivot and they will realize, man, he was a really good coach.
We asked the question on Twitter, John, looking back, would you still have fired Andy Reid? 44% say yes, 56% say no, they would not have fired Andy. And when you just look at the numbers, he's won 60% of his games in 18 full seasons, and this is his 19th year. You win 60% of the games in the NFL, that's a tough guy to give up on.
Yeah, and by the way, I would have moved on from him. I don't have a problem with the Eagles move on. I think everybody has a shelf life, and I think Andy had reached his here. And nobody lasts forever, with the possible exception of Bill Belichick. Maybe will last as long as he wants to. But for the most part, and I mentioned Michael Kendrick's quote yesterday on the show, and it remains true today. Everybody's renting space, and that includes the coaches. I'm not sure if he would have gotten it turned around here, because everybody knew the message. Everybody kind of stopped listening. There were other issues as far as the front office. He probably had too much power when it came to personnel. And with a clean slate in Kansas City, it was all new there. The players bought in, obviously, immediately, and they have immediate success again. So I don't think it necessarily would have went the same way in Philadelphia. But I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive either. He was a heck of a coach, and it was time to move on.
A couple updates on the injuries here. Jason Peters, Sunday.
Yeah, he was a full go at practice today. I was a little surprised by that when they signed Victor Solatko, the rookie tackle, back to the practice squad. I thought that was a clear indication that Peters probably wasn't going to practice. But he was out there, and he was a full participant. So he had said already that he was going to play on Sunday, and he obviously is. But at this stage of Jason Peters' career, you have to worry about in-game. You really do, because there are so many examples of him having to leave for a portion of the game for being banged up or something of that nature. And I don't think the Eagles are prepared for that as well as they thought they were going to be when Alan Barber was here, because I still think Big V is a work in progress. And as you saw in Washington, he struggled again.
You tweeted out about 25 minutes ago that Ronald Darby confirmed 4 to 6 weeks. Did you see him today?
Yes, Ronald did speak at his locker. He's in a boot. He had one of those roundabout things that you sort of roll like a mini bicycle to keep the weight off. And even though the Eagles haven't confirmed it, he said he'll definitely be back this season. It's 4 to 6 week injury, which means it's a clean dislocation and no ligament or tendon damage. And that's obviously it's not good, but it's the best case scenario after that injury.
And then on the kicking side, Caleb Sturgis, you also tweeted, John, at JF McMullen, that he confirmed he has a torn hip flexor muscle. But a lot of people talking about this Jake Elliott. They seem to like what they see from this kid. And all-time leading kicker at Memphis, Baldy was on earlier, said he might help the special teams. He's got a big leg, a lot of touchbacks, and you might be surprised by this kid.
Yeah, I mean, he was a draft pick as a kicker, so that tells you he's got a lot of talent. He's a fifth-round pick at Cincinnati, and I talked to a couple people from Cincinnati yesterday. He lost out to Randy Bullock. He just wasn't consistent enough kicking field goals, so we'll see how it goes. He's obviously got a bigger leg than Caleb Sturgis, so it should be able to help on kickoffs, but what I kind of said with Pete yesterday, you also have to remember, touchbacks come out to the 25 now. So a lot of special teams coaches, if you have a guy with a big leg, they want him to kick it high and directionally kick so you can cover the kick and keep people inside the 20-yard line. So just having a big leg is not necessarily what you want. So we'll see. He might be able to directionally kick well, but we still have to see. Today was 8 for 8 in practice. You know, very early portion of practice we get to see, but he was kicking and he made all his kicks. And yeah, he's got a big leg. But
Greg Zerloin, right? The kid from the Rams. Greg the leg.
Consistency. Great, yeah, exactly. I wish it was Justin Tucker. That's what you want. You want the guy with the leg who never misses.
That's right.
And we'll see how he does. But I think there's a very good chance. I'll say this. If he kicks well, Caleb Sturgis is going to be Cody Parkey. Just like Sturgis was to Cody Parkey, Jake Elliott's going to be to Caleb Sturgis because he's not going to lose this job if he kicks well.
We'll talk more about the game tomorrow, but just to kick it off, if you're a Eagles fan, how much does Tyreek Hill cause some cold sweats for Jim Schwartz?
Well, I mean, he should. I'll say that. I mean, he's a dynamic player. He might be the most dynamic player in the NFL. He can do so many different things. He might be the fastest player in the league. He's becoming a more well-rounded receiver. He was sort of a manufactured touch guy his rookie year, but now they've given him sort of the whole playbook. And you just lost the one guy who could conceivably run with him, and Ronald Darby.
Right, and this is amazing. The guys like this amaze me. He's 5'10", 185 pounds, 5th-round pick, West Alabama. And in his going into his second year, he's now become this kind of weapon.
Yeah, well, also remember he had some off-the-field issues, which kind of pushed him down the draft board, domestic violence issues. So that was part of it. Everybody kind of knew how explosive he was. But you're always concerned of a receiver. You mentioned the 5'10", 185. Well, typically that's not the size of an NFL receiver. But you look at Andy Reid and how he was able to utilize Deshaun Jackson for all those years, and he knows how to use a guy like that. But typically, you want Alshon Jeffrey as a receiver, or Mike Evans, or somebody of that stature. So it's interesting. I talked to Jalen Mills about the similarities formationally and personnel-wise between the Eagles offense and the Chiefs offense, because obviously they're very, very similar. But he pointed out, well, yeah, they use the same formations, they use a lot of the same personnel packages, but they have completely different players, body types. And it starts obviously with Hill versus a guy like Alshon Jeffrey or even Torrey Smith.
He's John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Check out all his Eagles coverage there. And don't forget his national NFL columns at FanRag Sports NFL, where he, of course, covers the league on a national basis. His national columns you can check out at JF McMullen on Twitter. We'll do it again tomorrow, pal.
Hey, thank you, Mike.
He's the man, John McMullen, with all the NFL news and notes here every day on the Sports Bash. And his appearance on the show is brought to you by Gino, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit Gino Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton. Online at GinoPinto.com. Gino, the winemaker's choice for 50 years.